G'day everyone and welcome to my art channel Brushes with Beck. Today's video is a continuation of a piece that I've been working on that I started a few weeks ago, so if you haven't seen those videos and you want to check out where I started with this piece, I will link those up in the cards above for you to check out. If you don't want to see those and you just want to keep watching, that is fantastic too. I'm working on the ears of the kangaroo for this video. I really wanted to get so much more done and I had anticipated getting so much more done. I thought, I could even finish the head, but I was way off with how long this was going to take me and way off with how much spare time I was going to have. So reluctantly, I didn't get anywhere near as much done as I wanted to. So for these ears on this kangaroo, you can see I'm laying in some colours there. That's just my base layers for those ears. I'm being pretty messy because I know that I'm going to be blending those out with a cotton bud. I'm mostly using, I think it's Sky Blue from the Polychromos set, the Mars Violet from the Derwent Drawing pencil range, and a variety of cool greys from the Faber-Castell Polychromos sets in different levels of brightness and darkness, and also some reddish tones. Can't remember the name of that one, but I also use a bit of Caput Mortem Violet as well. So really I did a lot of groundwork for this piece and laid in a lot of base colours. There was a lot of prep work to do for these ears before I could even think about laying in fur texture. And the more I looked at the ears on my reference photo, the more I realized how much variance in color tone there was, how much texture there was. There was a lot going on underneath the fur on these ears because the fur doesn't cover a lot of the ears. It's quite bare. So I really had to pay attention to what I was doing. I mean, you're always supposed to pay attention to what you are doing, but I had to make especially sure that my underlayers were quite precise and not as rough as I tend to be when I'm really covering those underlayers with a lot of fur. So there was a lot of work to do in preparation to be able to add that fur detail in. And it took me quite a long time to lay in all these colours, to get them looking how I wanted them to look, to get the values correct and the colour tones that I wanted where I wanted them. I had to go back and forth a few times and, blend out those colours, add some more colour, blend it out again, and back and forth and so on, as I usually do. And so we're just working through that, and I eventually got to a place where I was comfortable starting with the fur detail. So it's really a matter of, it's not really a limited number of layers I can do for this, so it doesn't matter if I end up doing a couple more layers of colour than I originally intended to, that I need to alter that I need to change it up, make it darker or a little bit lighter or a different colour tone, because PASTELMAT, which is what I'm working on for this piece, just works really, really well for accepting layer upon layer of pencil. So no problems with that whatsoever, and makes it really, really easy to progress a bit more slowly and carefully and not have to worry too much about what you're doing or overworking your paper like I find you can do with potentially smoother papers such as a hot pressed watercolor paper. So as you can see from this sped up section of the video, I have spent quite a lot of time on getting those underlayers right. It was probably about a third of the time or more of this section of the piece that you see me completing in this video. So it's quite substantial. So once I felt I was in a place where I was comfortable with those underlayers and the colours that were present there and the values, I went in and started with the fur detail. Now at first I started on that front side of the ear. As you can see, I laid in a few little streaks there, and I immediately thought, A, I was a little bit out of my depth on that part of the ear, and B, I needed to work from the parts of the ear that were behind before I worked on the parts of the ear that were in front, so that I could get the fur strands over one another, working from back to front in terms of a 3D object. So I'm working on the inside of the ear that's facing away from us and adding in a lot of those very fine fur strands. And I actually really enjoyed doing this part. It took a very, very long time, but for once I actually enjoyed really detailing in a lot of that really fine fur, paying attention to where each particular light strand was and each particular darker strand. So it was working out really, really nicely. I was moving down towards the bottom of the ear and realized that I really needed some color in this area down here to be able to continue on with this section of the ear and finish it up for where I wanted it to be to call this ear complete. So I had to add some color down there, build up those layers a bit and add the texture in down there as well. And I absolutely loved this section of this piece. And you'll see it come together as I work through building up those layers and then adding in that fine detail over the top. I finished this part and I was like, wow, this ear is coming along really, really well. Like, I'm actually very, very proud of this piece, especially of this ear. So I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything, but it's just, I was very impressed with what I managed to achieve. I find that sometimes I'm not necessarily rushing my art, but I work more quickly than what I should. So I actually slowed down a lot on this piece and focused a lot more, and it came out absolutely beautifully. The other problem I normally tend to have, which I think I've mentioned in one of the previous videos of this kangaroo, is that I tend to make fur strands too long when they're not supposed to be. And it's a matter of I'm thinking about the whole length of the strand of fur rather than what I can see of that strand of fur. So I managed to actually get the fur length more accurate, and I think that really helped, paying very close attention to that fur direction and adding in multiple layers, those lighter color tones, adding in those darker colors, and then layering over the top of those with those fur strands. It worked really, really well, and it came together so nicely for a really beautiful, like realistic sort of fluffy result. And you'll see that in this little section once I get all those light fur strands in and get that worked out. Because this little section, there's sort of all the fur parts at that one point, and so it goes around that sort of in a circle, and so the fur direction ends up going in every single direction around that, which is why you need to pay so much close attention to the way the fur is traveling in your reference photo, because you need to follow it very closely to make an accurate drawing to get that correct. So I've added in some beautiful white strands there, and it really brings out the vibrancy in that. Those very bright white highlights are very strong and make a nice contrast. So once I finished that lower area, I had to take a break that day because it was just, I couldn't do any more that day after I'd done that section. It took a really, really long time. And then so I moved on to the top surface of the ear. This was a little more, in a way it looks simpler, but it was, there's a lot more going on. There's not just, oh, obviously all the fur spirals out from this central point. It was, oh, the fur's going absolutely everywhere, and there doesn't really seem to be a rhyme or reason to it, and it's harder to tell exactly where it's going. So this was more of a, it took me less time because there was less fur strands, but I still had to pay very close attention to what was going on because it was easy to miss things about the way the fur was traveling and the change in fur color and those sorts of things. So there's some beautiful color tones in here. I've got some lovely sort of mid-brown fur strands coming off the ear, along with some lighters and the lighter fur strands catching the light a bit more, and then some darker strands as well. So using a variety of tones like that is really going to help with how realistic that looks, making sure you're following all the different colors that are present in there and mapping that out around those light and dark areas of your underlayers that you put in originally. So when I am drawing all of these really fine strands of fur, my pencils are very, very sharp. I'm keeping them well sharpened, rotating them often, so I'm always using the sharpest point on the pencil. As it starts to get, a tiny bit blunt, you can rotate that pencil around and continue to use a sharp edge before you need to sharpen it again. But it is very, very important to make sure you are using that sharp edge so you can get that fine line. The sharpness of the pencil enables you to lay down like a stronger color with less pressure. and you can get a much finer line, which is very, very important, especially on a textured surface such as PastelMat, which makes it more tricky to get a sharp line, which is where the sharpness of your pencil really, really comes into play. So make sure you are keeping it sharp to make sure you can get these really fine, beautiful fur details, and then pay such close attention, like I said, to the length of that fur and the direction of the fur, and it will make all the difference to how real your fur looks. Some of the very short strands are just like the tiniest of little dashes, and they're often, your fur strokes need to be much shorter than you think they need to be. So once I added in all of those lighter fur strands, I actually went in as well and added a little bit of darker colors. I think it was mostly like a cold gray 5 or 6 and a little bit of dark sepia. I added some of those in around some of those light fur strands just to punch up those darks in some of the areas in the lower section of the ear, and that really helped to emphasize those slightly more shadowed areas of the ear and really punch out those light fur strands. And that was something that was really beneficial, I think, doing that towards the end. So there you can see I have finished that one ear. I'm afraid I didn't get to do detailing on the second one, but the first one turned out absolutely fantastic, and I hope this video has been helpful to you, even if I've been a little bit rambly. It's been a very long week, but I'm very glad that I was able to finish this ear to show you for this week's video. So thank you very much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you again next week for another video. Stay creative.